He has been summoned to an academy of magic far beyond his world. He started with nothing, no allies, no map, no rules. Everything he has now, he took. This is Earth's greatest Magus, chapters 97 through 106. The old man nodded with a smile. He turned to the Cretan warriors and said in a foreign language, Ingel can Jaliafa. They can leave. Without any hesitations, all the warriors near the river retreated to the forbidden forest's tree line, except for the huge bald man with a great number of dark markings on his body. He didn't move until the old man repeated his order with greater force. The huge bald man clenched his axe one last time before walking with gritted teeth, stepping near the tree line. The second instance the old man had spoken in the foreign language, Emery belatedly noticed he could understand the language of the forest people. He had never heard or learned this foreign language before, but he guessed it was because of the symbol on his hands, similar to how he had suddenly understood the language of all people from the Magus Academy, despite coming from different planets and cultural backgrounds. Emery initially opened his mouth, wanting to speak. However, he withheld himself back, feeling it wasn't necessary to say anything since this could be handy in certain situations. Once the Cretan warriors were at a distance, Luna and her faithful bodyguard, Caston, stepped forward to speak with the old man. First, she looked over the bag that contained for a good few seconds before hesitantly handing it over. She said, "With this, our deal has come to a conclusion." "Yes," said the old man, taking back the silver-furred rabbit. "You may leave now and keep your promise to never return." Luna, however, didn't leave. "Is there something else?" asked the old man. She said, "Could you please allow us to look for survivors?" The old man gave her a look from head to toe before saying, "I'll allow it, but you only have until dawn to leave. Also, I'll have some of my warriors accompany you." "Thank you," answered Luna. Her eyes kept glancing on the hide bag and mutteringly said, "About the silver rabbit, no, stone dweller. You should go now," the old man said. The tone he used, though, wasn't angry. Instead, he sounded like the figure of authority that he was. Luna let out a big sigh and said, "Merlin, let's leave." The old man stomped his wooden staff on the ground and said, "This young man is not leaving." Luna looked as if she wanted to raise an objection. However, Emery gave her glance and shook his head. With that, she backed down and said, "Merlin, if you want. We can still. I'll be fine. Don't worry. Also, I would like to talk with them as well." "I don't think they have any malicious intent," said Emery, striking a glance at the old man and Morgana, still keeping quiet on the ground. Again, the old man tapped the ground with his staff, turned at Emery, and said, "Merlin, isn't it? My name is Rarest. The High Priestess would like to meet you. Let it be known that we are honored to welcome you into our village." After that, the two opposing groups parted ways. The old man Rarest delegated some of his warriors to watch the expedition group from the distance and a single warrior to go with the expedition group and search for any other survivors who might still be alive. At first, the Cretan warriors and Luna's expedition group seemed as if they were about to clash again. However, with the authority of the head figures, Luna and the old man, the hostility was dispelled. Luna's expedition group took the path in which they had come from, while Emery took a different path following the old man. As they walked through the dark forest, guided by the light of heavenly bodies in silence, Emery's gaze fell on the girl with the red hair whom he had fought earlier. She hadn't spoken a word nor made any small noises, as she just simply tightly wrapped his mantle around her body. And now that he had thought about it, he had no idea where they were taking him, so Emery took this opportunity to break the cold silence by making small talk. "Morgana, that's your name, right?" She didn't reply and continued walking. "My name, by the way, is Emery." Emery placed a hand in his mouth. His moment of weird familiarity with these forest people made him slip out his actual name. He stopped fixating on his careless blunder, which still didn't issue any response from the girl called Morgana. He then looked straight and said, "I guess you don't understand a word I'm saying." In the corner of his eyes, the girl looked at him for a moment, then said, "I do." "Oh, so you can speak and understand me. That's good. So where are we heading?" Emery replied. The girl was silent again, however. "You don't speak much, do you?" said Emery. "I do," answered Morgana. From the looks of it, Emery felt like this girl was a bit weird. She walked in confidence, but didn't seem to talk much. Or maybe just because she doesn't like him much. He was about to say something when his eyes took notice of what looked like the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. He stood frozen in place. Brennus and Morgana led the way and stepped on log, which emitted a glow of light. The leaves of various shaped plants seemed glowed with wondrous bluish and green lights, providing a warm atmosphere. He tested if the log would also do the same if stepped on it, and indeed it did. A light rippled underneath him. Moving his other feet forward, it repeated the same thing, sending waves of joy at the spectacular sight. Not being able to hold his curiosity any longer, he went up to what appeared to be a vine that was emitting a violet glow and used a spell from his plant spirit to inspect what kind of plant it was. "Yes!" exclaimed to himself. The first plant he checked was already a level 2 unique plant, and looking at the plant next to the vine, the one he had checked was just one of the many variations it had. It seemed that the Forbidden Forest was a great place for him to find unique plants. So, he couldn't wait to want to use fragmentation on these plants one by one and know more about their properties. He became caught up in his world, but immediately got pulled out of it as he noticed the stares of the villagers as well as Morgana and the old man. Letting out a great heave of air from his lungs, he took control of his excitement and proceeded to walk behind them. Brennus continued walking as the rest of the other warriors that had accompanied them disbanded, except for the huge bald one, and Morgana still walking beside him as they went deeper into the forest area. Eventually, they arrived in front of a cave that had 2 tall men holding spears and had a lot of black markings plastered on their bodies, which seemed to be no less than the amount of markings of the bald man beside Emery. "Greetings, honored chief. The high priestess is conducting the ritual as of the moment," respectfully said one of the guards. "I am aware. The high priestess is expecting us," answered the old man who was apparently their chief. "Understood," said one of the 2 tall men as they let the party through. Based on this interaction, although this chief seemed to be the acting leader of the forest people, or at least the warriors, the high priestess position appeared to command more authority and respect than him. And before they went in, old man Brennus asked Emery to leave his weapon, as they were about to enter a sacred place. The bald one had already handed over his weapon, so Emery didn't have an issue in doing the same. The cave was also filled with glowing mushrooms and moss, and Emery noticed that it was a bit damp. The tunnel wasn't long as well, and when they neared the exit, Emery noticed the interior of the upcoming chamber was lit with a bright light, and a faint singing entered his ears. When they exited, that was where Emery saw a giant tree standing in the land at the center of the cave's chamber, surrounded by a lake. The roots on the ground and the hanging roots of the giant tree glowed beautifully, including the grasses around it. There were a couple of root-like bridges on top of the lake, and beneath the towering tree were dozens of women sitting in a circle formation, touching the backs of each one with one hand as they sang in uniform. In the middle of the circle were 2 people, a young girl with long white hair and a beautiful fair-skinned, half-naked woman covered only by what appeared to be leaves. The beautiful woman said, "Jada Unk nu Bernalist Gaia." While Emery, Morgana, and Brennus stood at the entrance waiting, the chanting became stronger, urged by the lady dressed in leaves, as it echoed in the whole cave. The group of women started waving their bodies as another woman made her way inside the circle and handed over the silver-furred rabbit to the white-haired girl. The white-haired girl then presented it to the giant tree before the woman dressed in leaves and struck its head. Emery fell into a trance at what appeared to be a holy ritual where the beautiful, flawless-skinned woman dressed in leaves welcomed the white-haired girl after the rabbit had been sacrificed. As he observed them in a transfixed state, the white-haired girl emitted the same sense of familiarity similar to Morgana and the warriors with the black markings. However, the feeling of familiarity in his guts became stronger as his gaze fell on the woman dressed in leaves. It was like as if she was family. After the leaf-dressed woman blessed the girl with white hair, the singing started to fade, and the waving of the women became weaker. Soon enough, everything came to a stop, and all the women who were sitting stood and exited the tunnel in silence, leaving only the woman dressed in leaves and the girl with white hair before the giant tree. Once there were only the 5 of them left inside the cave's chamber, the white-haired girl stood, walked barefooted on the root bridge, and hugged Morgana with a slight jump. Brennus, the old man, took 1 step forward, bowed, and said with a solemn voice, "High Priestess, I have brought the young man you have requested." This was the biggest question Emery had in mind. Why was he singled out in the earlier encounter, and what was this feeling of connection between him and the people living here, especially from the woman sitting beneath the giant tree? She then opened her eyes and looked directly at him. A warm and gentle whisper reverberated in his head. It said, "I have been waiting for you. Come here." It looked like he wasn't the only one whom she had asked to come closer. Morgana, the white-haired girl, and Brennus bowed at the same time as they crossed the root bridge in order, with Emery being the last person to step on the root bridge. As he walked on it, he couldn't help but wonder if she could also speak to the black dragon, read his thoughts, or knew the existence of the black dragon inside him. Still, Kilgraga hadn't spoken, so it was probably asleep again. The ground trembled and the lake's water rippled. A huge shadow peeked behind the tree and revealed itself. As big as a house, a brown bear with countless green spikes on its back took a seat beside the high priestess. No longer speaking to his mind, her lips moved as she said, "Let me introduce you to Artio, the guardian of Gia." The bear roared, making Morgana, the white-haired girl, and Brennus simultaneously kneel. Emery was also affected by the enormous pressure the gigantic bear had conveyed through its deafening roar. However, he kept his head straight and stood his ground, barely standing. However, he wasn't about to just kneel because something powerful had put pressure on him. No. Contrary to his expectations, though, Nimue let out a smile, not a bit offended, while the bear quietly stayed still beside her. She said, "I am sure you have many questions, Emery." "Yes, High Priestess." "The first question I have in my mind is, how do you know my name?" asked Emery, still shaking on his legs. "You were mentioned to me by your mother, Vivian. In fact, she was a priestess and my niece. However, she had fallen in love with a warrior from the world outside. It was regretful that we have lost her, but destiny had allowed it to happen. Hence, it is what it is," answered Nimue with no hint of hatred or anger in her voice. Emery had put the pieces together that his mother was similar to Morgana, and he was related to them in some way or something. He had deduced that from the information whenever he transformed, just like how the symbol on his hand had identified Morgana to be a Fey creature. However, this confirmation only showed how much he didn't know about his own lineage. More questions started popping in his head as he wanted to know more about himself and his mother. But he didn't know where to start. Starting to get confused on what questions he should be asking, he went back to one of the earlier questions he had. Emery said, "Then, what am I?" Nimue stayed silent for a while before answering. "That is what interests me too, Emery. I have witnessed many of my male clan members be born with the same power of the females, the power of transforming oneself into our ancestors' image in my time. However, the power was too strong for the males to handle, so they were not able to live past 15 years of age because their bodies started deteriorating from such a young age. Unfortunately, it was the same situation for the maleborns when my sisters copulated with the locals of the forest. Fortunately, in our desperate times, we were able to find a way and turn the blood of our ancestors into the black markings in a male's body such as the one from Chief Brennus. I wonder, what makes you special?" Nimue then waved her hand, creating green blobs of light hovering around Emery. At first, Emery became wary and readied himself, but the green lights simply circled him before going back to Nimue and disappeared. There's something inside you, but I can't tell what it is. That must be your good fortune as to why you were able to activate our ancestral power and lived past 15 years. I'd very much like to know what it is, but Gaia asks me not to pry further," said Nimue. Luckily, she had misinterpreted it. Indeed, the spatial space of Chaos and the Black Dragon, Kilgraga, were inside him, and she was talking about them. However, Emery knew his first good fortune came from the Magus Academy. Nevertheless, it was better for the High Priestess to misinterpret it, since he wasn't allowed to speak of the Academy anyway. "Come closer," said Nimue. Emery had no reason to reject, so he did. She gave him a lovingly stare and said, "You look like your mother, Nimue," then touched Emery's shoulder that had the missing arm and chanted. A warm sensation filled his right shoulder before it vibrated, and out came a root like from the tip of the scar. It grew and grew until it was at the same length of his other arm before finally twisting itself and forming a hand. For a moment it was still the color of wood, but when he moved it, it turned to his skin's color, and when he moved it, it felt like he hadn't lost his arm. "Think of it as your coming home present," said Nimue, smiling. Emery waved it around with his eyes beaming. He was so grateful to her that he gave her a bow and said, "Thank you very much." "High Priestess!" Nimue chuckled. "I am sure you still have other questions, so feel free to ask and stay with us for as long as you like." Still not raising his head, once again he exclaimed, "Your generosity is truly appreciated." After that, Nimue mentioned she needed to rest, so Emery and the others left the cave. Brennus, the chief of the village, guided him to a tent near his personal tent and left not long after. When Emery lay down on his bed, made out of wood, Kilgraga finally spoke. I didn't expect there would be a Magus in this world. You sure kept quiet earlier." Emery replied. "That's because I'm considering whether to show myself or not," retorted the black dragon. "Yeah, even when she spoke in my mind you didn't speak. Were you able to hear her?" Emery asked, sitting up his bed. "I heard her. I'm not talking about that chick. I was referring to the tree behind her. She called the tree Gaia. It's only faint, but I can feel that Gaia is as strong as Chaos, so imagine my surprise. Anyway, this is a wonderful discovery. As for the place of power, I can say with certainty it's not in this place since the one here is already occupied. But there should be one more nearby, east of here," said Kilgraga. "Okay, I'll see it tomorrow. For now, I need to get some sleep," answered Emery. New places, new plants, new people. He couldn't wait to explore more once he had awoken for the next day. After an hour of practice, he realized he could use both left and right arms with the same level of expertise. An idea then came up in his mind. What if he used 2 swords on both arms? Would that be a good idea? He had never heard of any knights or any warriors using 2 swords. Doing so might be good. Hence, he decided to check that out once he returned to the Magus Academy. Finishing his practice, a red-haired girl approached him from the front. It was Morgana, the person whom he had fought last night in the form of a wolf. Emery laid down the long twig beside his tent and said, "Good morning, Morgana." Right, she was silent again, and only gave a gesture to follow her, making him think she was still mad for losing to him last night. No matter, Emery followed her as requested, and arrived at the largest tent he had seen in this village so far. Morgana walked straight to the large table that at least 10 people could dine on. "Seat," said Morgana, watching him. As Emery stood confused in the entrance, a girl with brown hair tied into 2 halves approached the table, looked at him from top to toe, and said to Morgana, "Is that him?" Morgana nodded. The girl with the brown hair then walked up to Emery and said, "Hello, my name is Tyra, the eldest of my sisters. I'm glad you could join us for breakfast." Tyra then pointed at the table where 3 other girls were already sitting. Emery recognized one of the girls, a girl with white hair from last night's ceremony who had hugged Morgana after everyone had left. As he made his way to seat, the girl with the white hair got up from her chair and started sniffing him. "You smell nice, mister," said the girl with white hair, startling Emery. "Glida, don't be rude," exclaimed Morgana to the girl with white hair. She then turned to Emery and said, "Please don't mind her." She then gestured to the 2 other girls seated and said, "These are Lilith and Lalith. They're twins." Emery was quite surprised that Morgana was taking the initiative to talk. He had tried to get her to speak last night and earlier, barely getting any responses, but when the topic was about her sisters, she was different. "Go ahead and take a seat." "I'll serve breakfast in a bit," said Tyra, walking away. "Don't flatter yourself. They are curious about you. After all, you're the first male able to transform," said Morgana with her arms crossed. "Wait, so all of you can," Emery said with eyes widened in disbelief. "Brother Emery, can you show us your transformation?" exclaimed Glida, her hands clasped together. "Who are you calling, brother?" said Morgana. She had her brows furrowed. "Well, the Lady of the Lake told us we are sort of related. I hope I haven't offended Brother Emery, have I?" Glida answered, looking at Emery with a worried expression. Emery shook his head and said, "Okay, later I'll show you." Tyra set down the food on the table. They were mostly cooked meat and some were boiled vegetables. The rest of the young girls started eating with their bare hands, making Emery feel awkward. Then he realized, although it was a bit late, that there weren't any utensils. It'd be weird now to ask for any of the sort, since they probably didn't have any specialized craftsmen, or it wasn't at the top of the list of priorities. Anyway, Emery decided to try it with bare hands, and as he ate, he wasn't sure if it was him, or the people chatting beside him happily, or eating with just hands made the food exceptionally tasty, despite the meal looking so plain and simple. Truth to be told, he wasn't feeling hungry this morning because as his spirit force and battle power increased, it made him less dependent on resting and eating. He was getting a bit of sustenance from the elements, albeit minute. But of course there were multitude other reasons why a person would eat food other than filling the stomach. Glita suddenly said, "Brother Emery, do you like the food? Sister Tyra is our best cook here. Don't you think she's the best candidate as a mate?" Emery nodded. He said, "Indeed, her food is great weight." "Did you say mate?" "Glita! You are not supposed to say that!" said Tyra, her cheeks turning as red as the meat. Glita, however, ignored her older sister's remark and continued, "Brother Emery, what are you looking for in a mate? We have eldest sister Tyra, a great cook, sister Morgana, the strongest, Lilith and Lalith are the fastest, and me, the prettiest." Emery started laughing nervously when Morgana's chair suddenly groaned as she stood up. She grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the tent. "Thanks," said Emery. He breathed out, feeling she had just saved him from such awkward and sudden questioning from Glita. Morgan had her back facing against him and said, "What do you wish to do today?" "The High Priestess told me to accompany you wherever you want to go." "Oh, you don't have to." "I can." "No, the High Priestess has given me her command, so I have to fulfill it," Morgana interjected adamantly. Emery could tell from her tonality that no amount of arguing would work. "So," he said, "okay. Then I'd like to take a walk around the forest. To the east, perhaps." "That's not fair, Sister Morgana. You want to keep Brother Emery only to yourself," said Glita, exiting the tent with a grin. She added, "We want to join too." "It's better to go in a pack than alone," said Tyra. The two twins nodded in silence. Emery looked first at Morgana, who still had her face away from him before looking at the other four and saying, "All right." The 5 girls went back inside the tent, and when they came out, they were already in their Fey form. 5 giant wolves twice the size of a normal man. They walked out of the village with all eyes on them, but not a single villager had a look of fear in their eyes. Instead, it was admiration. They started heading east of the village, and once they had found a small clearing, Emery tapped into his bloodline and transformed into a half-beast, half-human. He had wolf-like ears, small fangs, hairs on his face, chest, arms, and a bit on the legs. The black wave-like markings, similar to the Cruton warriors, were all over his whole body. The white wolf, Glita, once again sniffed him. He backed away when her voice suddenly resounded in his mind. "Brother Emery, you really smell just like us," said Glita in her wolf form, her tail wagging. "Let's go," said a stern voice that was clearly Morgana's. In that afternoon, they ran together around the forbidden forest. The wolves were on all 4 while he ran on 2 feet. Despite running with only 2 limbs like a human, Emery was still able to keep up with Morgana, Tyra, and Glita except against the twin sisters, Lilith and Lalith, whose speed looked like a blur. Emery couldn't help but feel joy rising from his heart. He was bonding with people whom he shared his bloodline with, and as more time passed, the sense of being able to feel their presence even when they were far away and spoke telepathically grew stronger. Eventually, he was picking up some of their habits, and an information popped in his mind. This ability was shared among the pack, which strengthened the success rate whenever they hunted. It could be used when alone or in a pack. They went further east of the forbidden forest until they finally stopped before a hill where there were gigantic stones arranged in a circle on the ground. Some of the stones were on top of 2 stones, making Emery wonder how could such a thing have been built. And it was at that moment when Kilgraga's voice sounded in his mind. "This is the place, kid." He stepped closer, thinking to himself, how was this possible? The stones looked so mighty and heavy that he could only imagine someone like Kilgraga, a mythical dragon, would be able to move something like this. However, the bigger question was, what was the purpose of these stones? As if Tyra had heard his thoughts, she walked up beside him and spoke directly through his mind. According to the High Priestess, this was an old shrine, but how and when it was made were also the same questions she had because these rocks had been here even before they had settled in the forest. He gave a nod and proceeded to walk up the hill and touch the stone. Once he confirmed that the 5 girls in wolf's form were out of sight, Emery tried to contact Kilgraga. "Can you hear me?" Emery asked. Kilgraga voiced his thoughts to Emery. "Yes, kid, good. This is the place. There is something that I'll need you to do." "Okay, but let's do it later." "I'll come back when it's dark," replied Emery in his head. "The quicker, the better. "Don't make me wait too long," answered Kilgraga. After spending a good few minutes touching the rocks and walking underneath some stones that had another stone on top of it, he went back at the foot of the hill and asked the rest of the girls to guide him back at the village. The moment he walked in at the village, however, the group of the warriors he had fought with last night, as well as a dozen others, were waiting in front of his tent. The huge bald man who had battled with Caston stepped forward, raised his axe, and declared, "Outsider! We, the Akavi warriors, do not welcome you as one of us. Come and prove to us you are trustworthy." Shouting erupted as the dozens of warriors struck their wooden shields. The 5 girls had gone to their tents first, and when they got back, they were already wearing clothes. They went up to Emery, and Morgana said, "This is the Akavi warriors' trial. You don't have to prove yourself to them since the High Priestess already considers you as part of us." "The eldest sister, Tyra," said Morgana. "Don't tell you're worried he'll take your title of the strongest, are you?" Morgana turned to her and answered, "No, but I find this trial to be unnecessary and silly." "Outsider! What say you?" challenged the huge bald man while waving his axe that split the air. "So you're not a coward, outsider," said the bald man with a grin. The rule of the trial was simple. Emery, the challenger, would stand in the middle of the circle that the Akavi warriors formed in the center of the village. Those who wish to challenge Emery may step forward for a one-on-one duel. This would continue until no warriors from the Akavi group steps forward or Emery falls unconscious. Emery readied himself and raised the 2 swords on his hand, one of the front while the other overhead. The first warrior approached, holding an axe. There was no signal when they should start, but since the warrior was already circling him, Emery took the initiative and dashed to swing his swords. It felt weird for Emery using the swords to block and attack at the same time. This was his first time doing this, after all. As more exchanges occurred between them, though, he was getting used to swinging the swords from different angles, which barely left room for the first warrior to block. Eventually, the first warrior surrendered, cementing the first victory for Emery. The next man Emery would fight was a spear and shield user. He decided to take this one more cautiously because the spear had a longer reach. His opponent struck the first blow this time, forcing Emery to be on the defense this time. Although the opponent was using a spear, each strike behind it had a heavy weight that was much stronger than all the fighters he had encountered. Still, Emery just needed one opportunity to close the distance. Spear was a staple weapon. Because of its long reach, however, its strength was also its weakness. Soon enough, Emery parried the warrior's spear and knocked the enemy down by crashing himself at the enemy's shield before he pointed the sword at his enemy's throat. "Wow, Brother Emery is so strong," cheered Glita from the sidelines. That, however, attracted more enmity from the warriors around him. He had been so focused on what was in front of him that he hadn't realized the village center had been filled with spectators, both old and young. The village chief, Rarest, was also there but didn't say anything as he continued watching. He could see from the spectators' eyes they were curious about his strength, while these Akavi warriors still emitted malicious intent. Nevertheless, Emery thought this was still necessary in order to gain their trust. After all, he was indeed an outsider. He had been raised not from here, even though he shared the same blood with these people. The bout continued. Emery defeated the 3rd, the 4th, and after he defeated the 5th warrior, his arms were starting to stiffen. He waved his arms, trying to shake off the unpleasant feeling when Morgana stepped in and said, "That's enough. The trial is only supposed to last 3 duels at most. He has proven himself already." "He is an outsider. He must prove himself," shouted the bald man. "This is not right, Kavi." "Chief Rarest, please ask the Akavi warriors to back down." He already had N before she was able to complete her sentence. Emery patted her on the shoulder and said, "I'm still okay. Did you hear that? The outsider says he's still fine. Let's continue," declared Kavi, the huge bald man. Morgana gritted her teeth and went back to where his sisters were watching. The 6th warrior stepped in and Emery readied himself once more. He very much would like to transform right now, but as a respect to tradition, he decided against it and held himself back from using any spells. He convinced himself this was a good experience in improving his fighting skills and a great opportunity to know what his limits were. After defeating the 6th warrior, Emery got on one knee and gasped to catch his breath. Some of his sweat was burning his eyes, and he felt like hot air was exiting all over his body. This was probably his limit, he believed, but he had to make for one more push. He raised his head and sword and pointed it at the person named Kavi. But to his surprise, the bald man simply grinned and sent another of his allies to fight him. The seventh warrior charged and attacked relentlessly without giving Emery a moment of rest. It was a one-sided bout. Fortunately, Emery still managed to find a weakness at the seventh warrior's attack pattern, and he exploited it. And with that, Emery claimed the seventh victory. He then stabbed his two swords on the ground, trying to support himself. His arms and legs were shaking, throat as dry as a drought, and the feeling of hot air exiting body earlier now felt like a blazing flame inside him. Emery's vision was blurring, and his hearing was starting to emit the buzzing sound. He could barely lift his head, but Morgana's voice still entered his ears. "Kavi, you are shameless! Fight him at his best!" Morgana screamed. Based on that, he understood that the huge bald warrior had stepped forward, forcing himself to stand up with one of the swords as the support. Indeed, that warrior with the most black markings on his body was making his way forward. Emery closed his eyes first and breathed in a large amount of air to collect himself. The pounding of heart was reaching his ears, but after exhaling all he had taken in, he felt a bit better. Readying himself for his last fight, he grabbed the two swords and waited for Kavi to come closer. "Come on, brother Emery! Do not lose against that big buffoon!" Glita once again cheered Emery, making the huge man chase him harder. Emery landed a few paces away, while taking in more of the crisp air to at least get some of his energy back. He wanted to counter or block it with the swords, but as he felt the heavy weight behind the wind-splitting two-handed attacks from Kavi, Emery decided to dodge instead at the narrowest margins in order to conserve his strength. The spectators let out various expressions. Some even closed their eyes, while the attacks barely missed Emery. "Kavi, are you trying to kill him?" Morgana shouted. Emery noticed Kavi's expression turned even uglier and once more rushed with a great heavy slash. This time Emery's leg failed to abide his will, so he raised both swords to at least protect himself. The axe fell down on him and broke one of them as it continued downward, and managed to cut his left shoulder and throw him on the ground. Emery laid on the ground with his left shoulder bleeding, and as he expected, it wasn't a deep cut because he felt that Kavi purposefully pulled back the axe at the last second. "I won," said Kavi, and again he shouted out his victory to the crowds. "I won." He turned to Emery and added, "Outsider, your skills in battle are admirable. Last night, I noticed you did not kill anyone. Although some of my brothers fell because of you, I do not hold you in contempt. Hence, I deem you worthy of our trust and welcome you in our ranks as an Akavi warrior." Kavi then turned around with his arms high in the air. The crowd roared in delight. Morgana moved to try and help Emery, but before she could do anything, Emery was already back on his feet and said, "Wait, I haven't given up yet." Gasps of awe resounded from the crowd as Emery held his bleeding left shoulder. He could still move, and this meant he hadn't reached his limit yet. Somehow, he felt like grinning. There was a fine line between determination and stupidity. Which of was he? It was up for other people to decide. He raised his right sword and said, "We cannot disappoint the spectators just yet. Come on, my bald friend. Let us continue." "Ha ha ha! You're really a terrific warrior worthy of respect." "All right, take this," shouted Kavi as he delivered another huge swing coming from the side. Emery held the sword with both hands and shouted as he used all his strength to shove away the axe. A fierce, explosive clank filled the surrounding as the sword met the axe, stopping an inch away from both warriors. This proved Emery was at least as strong as Kavi with his current physical prowess for the battle power. "Erg! Get off me!" Kavi screamed, muffled, but Emery already started punching the Akavi warrior. Then, Emery noticed the black markings on Kavi's body started glowing. Suddenly, Kavi was able to grab hold of Emery's fist and threw him across the crowd of people. Kavi finally uses the power of his bloodline, and both his speed and strength increases. With Emery's current condition, there's no way Emery could match him. "What are you doing, Kavi?" shouted Morgana as she stepped forward, but the chief stopped her making any movements. Kavi ran at a great speed, but when he reached Emery, Emery shouted at the top of his lungs, sending a wave of air with him as the eye, and used his bloodline power and transformed into half-man, half-beast. As much as Emery hates to break his word for not using his bloodline transformation, he hates to lose even more, and seeing his opponent use his bloodline power, Emery doesn't feel the need to not use his Emery, then slowly started to change his form, and this is the first time the villagers see Emery's form, a male Fey wolf form. "Go get him, brother, Emery!" scream. Jada first, Emery disappeared from Cavi's sight. Cavi darted his eyes around, trying to follow Emery's speed. Even though Emery had used his bloodline power, he still refused to use any spell. So, Emery decided to use his greatest advantage while he was in this form, speed. Emery ran in circles with Cavi as his focal point. Dust from the ground was starting to rise, and he darted forward to punch Cavi. Cavi, however, caught it, rendering his punch ineffective. Still, Emery did the same action. Every time he threw a punch, Cavi was able to catch it. Luckily, Emery was able to pull back his punches, not allowing to grab hold of him. "Stop running and fight me," challenged Cavi. Emery stopped his tracks as he stared at Cavi. He then raised his arms and got ready for a brawl. Cavi rushed at Emery and exchanged punches. Some were dodged, some were blocked. However, because Emery had a greater reaction time in this form, all of Cavi's punches didn't come close to Emery. After dodging about a dozen blows, Emery started fighting back. He landed a hit on Cavi's stomach, which made the warrior curl in pain, only to be met with Emery's knee already waiting. He then sent a flurry of punches, which Cavi blocked by turtling his whole body. With each and every punch Emery threw, he could feel the defenses of Cavi were slowly weakening, so Emery pulled back and gathered all his strength into one last punch. Emery once again screamed and landed his punch, which slipped through the narrow opening of Cavi's guard. Cavi flew a couple of paces away, barely breathing. At this moment, though, Emery was also spent. He could no longer feel his body as he fell down. Even though he had fallen as well, no one else dared to step forward. After a few moments of no movements coming from both warriors, Cavi's body rustled as he rose from the ground. He walked up to Emery and offered a hand to Emery, who was awake the whole time. Cavi smiled and said, "Welcome, brother." Emery reached out for Cavi's hand and got pulled up. Once they were both standing, the crowd erupted with roars and cheers. Back in the large tent where Emery had eaten breakfast with the 5 sisters, he was being attended by Tyra, who was taking care of his wound on the left shoulder. Glita was sitting by the table, her head on top of it, and said, "Brother Emery, you do realize why he was fighting you, right?" "Yeah, I know I'm still an outsider, so I understand that trust is yet to be gained," answered Emery. "You don't have to worry about that. The High Priestess's will is absolute. If she says you're one of us, then you are," replied Glita. "The real reason for that fight is because of Sister Morgana." "What do you mean?" asked Emery. "The strongest male gets to mate with the strongest female," interjected Tyra while cleaning his wound. The twins who were sitting beside Glita nodded in agreement. Morgana, though, was silently watching the crackling fire by the oven as if she hadn't heard anything. It's no secret that Cavi is fond of Sister Morgana. The trial was just an excuse to prove himself he's stronger than you, so he could be again worthy for her. Actually, Chief Brennis talked about preparing the wedding, but I've heard that you defeated Sister Morgana last night, and since Cavi had never defeated her, that places you as the strongest, therefore, you have the right to mate with Sister Morgana then, explained Glita. Emery was speechless as he turned his gaze to Morgana, staring at the fire. He didn't know what to say, or even wanted to continue the conversation. So after having his wound cleaned and eating dinner in deep thought in this tent, he got up and excused himself back to his tent to rest. Once he noticed that only the noise of the campfire could be heard, he got out of his tent and was once again mesmerized by the varying-colored glow of the fauna. The moon was shining brightly, even though its light barely touched the soil of the forbidden forest. He could still see his surroundings and proceeded to quietly head east to where that mighty rock formation was. Author note: as he stared at the moonlit hill, the gentle humming of insects hiding around gave Emery a sense of soothing feeling, an ambience that calmed his spirit. He became transfixed, gazing at the mighty rocks, but that lasted only for a moment when the black dragon's voice resounded. The dragon inside him said whoever picked this location, they knew what to look for. Unfortunately, this formation was done poorly and it's broken. Emery asked, "So, do I have to find another location again?" "I don't think I have enough time. You don't have to do that. This is suitable enough. I'll be able to stay here once you're at the Magus Academy. It'll be better for me to stay here than go with you. My presence will only draw unwanted attention. Still, with this condition, it will take a long time before the spatial space for cows can be open again," answered Kilgraga, disappointed. Okay, I understand. Is there anything I can do? Asked Emery. Nothing significant at the moment because your realm is too low, and moreover, you have no understanding about the path of formations. However, there'll be something that you can do once you're back in the Human Magus Academy, said Kilgraga. What is it then that you need me to do? Asked Emery. Emery's consciousness was sucked back into the dark illusion room where Kilgraga, in the form of the faceless man, had always appeared. He walked up to Kilgraga and the faceless man said, First, you'll need to learn formations even at its basic level. Only then you'll be able to do something about this rock formation. The second is this. Kilgraga then stretched his palm and showed it to Emery. At first, Emery thought Kilgraga was messing with him again since he couldn't see anything. But when he took a closer look, there was indeed a piece of a pitch-black rock lying on white palm. And as he squinted his eyes, the pitch-black rock, which looked like a small egg, appeared to have something glowing inside it, like millions to billions of small dots that sparkled, similar to how stars in the night sky twinkled. Indeed, the first one would be easy to get. If he couldn't get inside the Institute of Formation, then he could probably get it through the Golden City, since it would be something basic anyway. As for the second one, he had to be discreet in finding information about it. Maybe there was a library or something similar to the Magus Academy once he returned. Regardless, the bottom line had been stated. He had to do this both if he would like to use the benefits of Kaos once more. He was pretty sure he would have a hard time in keeping up with the other acolytes in the Magus Academy, so Emery needed this power of Kaos. If I am unable to find the item, is there no other way? Asked Emery. There is another way, answered Kilgraga. Emery sighed. This black dragon really liked to withhold information at the last moment. He asked, What is it? Bring your lovely granny and kill her in this spot, so I can get back the power of Kaos she had stolen from me, said Kilgraga with a tone of hatred. Hearing Granny's name, Emery suddenly remembered what Granny had done, and within a second, a blaze of fury rose inside him. Indeed, he recalled Kilgraga talking about how Granny had also stolen a part of the Kaos power back in the spatial space. And as he thought about it eliminating her, he wouldn't have any qualms killing her. After what she did to Miss Chire and Lanzo's family, and probably to other villages she had sacrificed to get back her youth preceding Miss Chire, it would be for the best, he thought, to end Granny once and for all. Do you understand everything I have asked you, kid? Asked the faceless man. Emery nodded. Good. I am not expecting you to return with both of the things I have asked, especially the second task after you have finished your time in that Human Magus Academy. So, don't come back unless you have both. I want to enjoy some peace and quiet, said Kilgraga. The dark illusion room faded, and Emery slightly shook once he was back in the real world. Let us proceed with the thing I need you to do in this place of power, so I can stay here for the meantime. I'll need you to bleed and mark the stone in the center in accordance to my instructions, said Kilgraga. Emery walked up the hill to the very center where there was another slab of stone lying on its back. As Emery's dagger hasn't been returned since confiscated by the guard when he entered the village, Emery found a small sharp stone, and when he was about to slit his palm, he asked, This won't hurt the people in the forest, will it? No, Kilgraga said sternly. How can I believe you? Asked Emery with doubt. You puny human, the words of a supreme being such as I is not like the loose lips of you lower beings. If you won't do it willingly, I shall force you if I have to. Kilgraga roared inside Emery's head. Yes, okay. Please don't get angry, O supreme being. I'll do as you ask, Emery replied. In fact, deep in Emery's mind, he somewhat trusted the dragon. He just wanted to ensure the villagers whom he shared his bloodline with wouldn't be hurt or affected by this at all. Nevertheless, he had given his word to this dragon, and as a man raised by an honorable person, he had to keep it. Emery slit his palm and ran it across the rough surface of the bluish-gray stone. He followed Kilgraga's instruction of making sharp-looking letters or symbols that appeared to be a bit like claw marks, and once he was done, a moment later, Emery screamed as he felt his scarred chest burning, and out came a black wisp, similar to the one he had seen coming out of the elf's corpse in Elder's Respite, and entered the slab of stone. He suddenly became weak, and his consciousness started to fade as he fell back on the ground. Emery was still barely aware of his surroundings, but nothing seemed to be happening, for everything was silent. Only the buzzing of the insects around reverberated in the air, making Emery wonder if it had worked or not. But his question was answered when the ground he was lying on weakly shook. The birds from the trees downhill exited their homes, and suddenly the stones lit as bright as day, and the tremors became stronger. Emery became blinded by the light, prompting him to close his eyes, and finally fell unconscious. When he opened his eyes, he saw that it was still evening, but when he got up, the markings, which looked like scratch marks he had drawn on the stone, was no longer there. He lifted himself using the stone slab as a support and tried calling for Kilgraga in his head. But the dragon didn't answer him. Once again, he attempted to contact the dragon, even by shouting out loud with his actual voice. Still, there was no response. He then leaned on the stone slab, waiting for the dragon to answer. After sighing, Emery figured Kilgraga had indeed disappeared and was resting in the stones. He got up, deciding not to waste any more time in waiting, and proceeded to walk back to the village. As he went down the hill, however, Morgana and Chief Brennus appeared behind the tree line. Chief Brennus moved forward with his walking staff and said in a serious tone, "The High Priestess is wanting to see you, now." "Almost all of it," Chief Brennus answered. Morgana quickly added, "The High Priestess had asked us to watch and follow you." Emery's brows furrowed, wondering if he had made a mistake or had done something grave that possibly affected the whole village. If it was, he swore he'd get back at Kilgraga, because these people were the closest thing he had for a family. The three walked in silence after that inquiry for the whole trip. When they reached the guards at the entrance of the cave, Emery noticed the guards were eyeing him, making him feel a bit more uneasy. Still, the guards only bowed, and they entered the tunnel without issues, before finally arriving at the foot of the tree where the Lady of the Lake, dressed in leaves, was waiting. Morgana and Chief Brennus knelt, and so did he. The reason why Emery kneeled this time wasn't because of fear, rather due to respect for what the High Priestess had done for him, as well as reverence, for she was his great-aunt from his mother's side. Nimue walked closer to them and said in a gentle manner, "Thank you for bringing Emery here. Chief Brennus, Morgana, you may leave." Morgana and Chief Brennus bowed once more and left in silence. Emery got on his feet, glanced at the woman before him and at the giant bear with greenish spikes and roots on its back sitting in peace beside the tree called Gaia. He waited for her to speak, but she didn't do anything afterward and kept her eyes closed, which further made his beating heart race faster. He started fidgeting, and so, to break the uneasy silence, Emery spoke. "May I know why I have been summoned, High Priestess?" he asked. Only then did she open her eyes. She casted the green light spell that hovered around him and said, "My apologies. I was talking to Gaia and had to confirm that the thing inside of you has indeed disappeared. Finally, we can talk more." Emery tried to inquire how he had been found out when Ardeo, the guardian of Gaia, suddenly rustled from its position and started making its way with its 4 paws toward him. He took a step back, but Nimue asked him to be at ease by saying, "You're safe here, don't worry. We won't hurt you." He took another step back when Nimue said, "Please, stay still. Gaia has something to show you through her guardian Ardeo." The bear stopped an inch away from Emery's face, and he felt its hot and damp breath. The bear opened its jaws and blew at Emery, prompting him to close his eyes. When he opened it, however, he found that he was in an entirely different place. The white light then thumped, and the 9 lights slowly made their way toward it as if they were being pulled. The red light was the first merge with the white light below, making it bigger. Then the blue, the yellow, the green. It grew bigger and bigger, and when the 9th light, the black light, merged with the white light, a shiver ran up his spine and his heart began to race as he watched the enormous 10 different colored lights mix together, become smaller, and disappear. The void became Emery's companion when a sudden explosion roared with such force that made him think his whole existence had just been erased. He crossed his arms, hoping to block it. He thought he had just been wiped out, but that wasn't the case. Emery could still feel his arms, his body, his feet, and moving according to his will. Carefully, he opened his eyes and saw thousands of smaller lights floating aimlessly in a black canvas of emptiness, scattered all everywhere. He watched as some of them entered various types of planets, but there was one in particular, a green light that flew right through him, which caught his attention. Emery felt a vague connection to this light and followed it until it stopped. Emery's full attention became stuck to it as he observed the green wisp enter a blue planet with green patches. As soon as it entered the planet, Emery's vision zoomed in to a small fledgling of a plant until it grew and grew, becoming a large tree that looked just like the one in the cave. After that, the illusion ended. He stared blankly at the towering tree in front of him, feeling like he had witnessed a birth of something. Emery tried to speak, but no words came out his throat. He tried again, but it was only after the humongous bear, Ardeo, guardian of Gaia, returned to its spot beside the tree, his voice found its way out his throat. He asked the first thing that came to his mind on what he had just seen with a shaking voice. Is this the story of Gaia? Nimue nodded. The green wisp, was that Gaia? Was the thing, the black wisp, inside of me also the same? Did it also have the power to affect a planet? Asked Emery. I don't have the answer to that, I'm afraid, said Nimue. She turned to the tree behind her and added, only Gaia has the answer to that. Emery fell into silence. Gaia asked me to show you this, but what it entails is something that even I do not have the answer for. What is clear, however, is that Gaia has allowed whatever was inside the black wisp to stay there. As for the rest of what has been shown to you, it's something that you'll have to figure out on your own. The High Priestess said all of a sudden. I see. These were the only words Emery could say at the moment as his mind wandered into deep thought again. There is one more thing that I need to talk to you about. I understand that your mind is preoccupied with the vision, but please place it in the back of your mind at the moment, for the thing I'm about to discuss is a personal between us, said Nimue. She beckoned the confused Emery to follow her closer to the tree and showed him a familiar item lying on the stone table in front of them. It was the jet black knife, the one that he had surrendered to the guards for safety reasons last night before he entered this cave. I think we both know the owner of this dagger, she said. The High Priestess handed over the black knife and added, She is my sister. Her name is Maeve. Then Priestess Nimue recounted an incident that happened more than 100 years ago when she was chosen to be the High Priestess. An argument sparked between her and her sister Maeve, which caused the forest barrier door to open so that this forest became one with the outside world. You see, Emery, my sister and I have our differences, but ever since I received the blessing from Gaia, she never dared to harm the forest. But now it appears that my sister has gained strange power from the thing inside of you. And this made me worried, said Nimue. Emery suddenly realized that he was the cause of the problem. When Granny took some of the Kawa's power, she turned young, and it appeared that was what troubled the priestess. I am sorry, High Priestess. I'll see to it, and I'll be responsible for the mistake I made, said Emery. The High Priestess shook her head and said, I'm sorry I had to ask you this since it's my responsibility to take care of my sister, but you see, I'm unable to leave the Shrine of Gaia. I am just hoping that you will be careful when you next see her, I understand. High Priestess, said Emery. This was one more reason to find and solve this problem as soon as he could. His list of things to do just keep on getting longer and longer, and finding Granny just bumped into the top things he needed to take care of. Emery, come visit me every night. I hope to teach you more about Gaia. I am sure it will help you to understand more about the spirit energy and increase your cultivation in the element, said Nimue. I am very much grateful for any advice you can give, Emery said with a bow. This was the only thing he could respond to right now. He then left the cave with a mind full of thoughts. From the things Kilgraga had asked, the vision Gaia had shown him to the newly acquired knowledge that Granny Maeve being his relative. As he laid down on his wooden bed, staring at the ceiling made out of hide above him, he couldn't get his mind off these thoughts. There was, however, one thing that he knew for sure, and that was to get stronger as fast as he could and use his time wisely before he gets recalled to the Magus Academy in 3 weeks. Author note: since Kilgraga stayed at the place of power where the stone was, training at the spatial space was not an option until he accomplished what the Black Dragon had asked. And although Nimue, the High Priestess, had mentioned she would teach him about Gaia and cultivating the elements, he felt that wouldn't be enough to achieve everything he had on his to-do list. Finally, his mind wandered to the Magus Academy. He remembered that on his last day, the acolytes who were on the top rankings, particularly the ones on top, received a great amount of contribution points. As far as he knew, contribution points could be exchanged with a multitude of things at Golden City. So, in order to match those acolytes who were in the top 100 last time, he needed to rake in as many contribution points as he could and exchange them into something that would empower himself. Emery's eyes fell on the dimming plant, hugging the trunk of a tree that had a house on its branches. Remembering this one was one of the reasons he came here, he went ahead and picked up a basket, strapped it on his back, and picked the plant. He spent the next couple of days exploring the forbidden forest with Morgana, who still didn't talk much as she followed in silence and gathered a large variety of plants that resonated with his plant element affinity. Emery picked up multiple types of mushrooms, flowers, roots, and even some wild fruits and vegetables he had found lying on random spots of the forest. The more he explored the forest, the more he found appreciation for its hidden beauty and hidden floras and faunas. Every day he discovered new stuff and found comfort in the abundant presence of the plant and trees. He climbed the highest trees, swam through the river, explored the hills and caves, and even trekked through the swamp. He found thousands of different species of plants in the wilds. Although most of what he had found with Morgana had no value after analyzing it, he still found himself learning about these different kinds of wonders. A few times during the last 2 weeks, he went out with the Fey wolves to hunt, to bond, and to improve his innate skill named Wild Hunt. During those hunts, Emery found it interesting that there were indeed unique types of animals living in this forest, which was one of the probable reasons how rumors of monsters roaming the forest came into being. He hadn't seen anything like the vine monster back in Elder's Respite, though. Mostly, they were differently colored animals, and according to the girls, some of the animals, like the silver-furred rabbit, seemed to increase their strength. However, they were extremely rare, and they would usually track one for days, or in worse cases, weeks before they could get a glimpse of it. So, even though Emery wanted to see one of that silver-furred rabbit, unfortunately, more time was needed to even find one. Because of this as well, he wondered if there was a spell in the Magus Academy where they could study animals similar to the fragmentation spell Eon had sold him. After 2 weeks of scouring the woods, it was time for him to start focusing on increasing his points. For each unidentified herb analysis, Emery received 1 contribution point, and for the rank 2, he received 10 contribution points. So far, he accumulated 170 points from all the plants in Mistshire and also 120 points from the apothecary store in Lionark City. Adding the plants here, the total contribution points he had now was 530 points. Of course, all he had done was analysis, not fragmentation. Extracting the essences was more lucrative than simply analyzing these plants and herbs. Emery closed himself inside his druid house for a whole day and started extracting hundreds of plants one by one. After using fragmentation for the 100th time, Emery laid down on his bed full of sweat. This was the first time he had felt like this, so he guessed there was a limit in using spells. Nevertheless, this was worth it. He grinned in great satisfaction as he checked his total contribution points. Remembering how Klee had received 1,000 contribution points for being part of top 100 acolytes, he now had twice of Klee's, which he would be using for the upcoming year of Magus Academy. He then got up, categorized, and stored each of the plants neatly. He wanted to start experimenting with them, but there were just too many of them at the moment, and he thought it would take weeks to really find new useful recipes. So, he decided to just focus on improving the quality of his most useful recipes, the cleansing potion and the strength paste. Once applied to the parts of a human body, it could stimulate the muscles in the part it was applied to, increasing muscle strength twice of its normal capability. Be advised, the increase is temporary and cannot be used repeatedly because it would damage the muscles. With enough blue powder material to experiment on, and with the help of finally Emery able to increase both recipes into their maximum potency. 105 Nature's blessing in contrast to his expectations, though. The High Priestess's teachings were not about understanding the plant element itself, rather, how to communicate his plant spirit with the Gaia. Night after night, only after 2 weeks was he able to connect with Gaia, and when that happened, he felt one with nature. He saw the seeds sprouting into life, the life force of the tree, the wonderful nature, etc. And this caused his plant spirit within his spirit core of darkness to increase tremendously, until he finally received a huge breakthrough with the plant elements. His understanding of the plant element had reached peak stage. Just a few more increases of spirit force and spend more time cultivating the other two elements, he would eventually reach rank 6 acolyte. I believe that congratulations is in order. I can feel that you have passed a threshold in your understanding of the plant element, said the high priestess to him with a great smile. Yes, I have. Thank you, high priestess, for your guidance, said Emery with a bow. She shook her head and said, No, I didn't do much. It's the will of Gaia, and your talent has made you reach this point. In fact, I have never seen someone else, including my late sisters, who can absorb the elements as fast as you. Even Vivian didn't have much talent. I'm pretty sure that, in a dozen or so years, you'll be more powerful than me. Your words are too kind, high priestess, answered Emery with an awkward smile. Inside him, though, he was undecided if he would be proud or not. In this place, he probably was the most talented, but there was Thrax, Julian, and Klee in the south, and Chumo in the east, who all had a higher spirit aptitude than him. Also, in the Magus Academy, he was the only one who had spirit aptitude B, while the rest had A. Somehow, inside him, he wished he could be more. Thinking of the academy, he then tried to ask if she knew the existence of the Magus Academy. As his mind wandered, Nimue, the high priestess, said, I hope you don't fall and keep your usage of our ancestors' legacy for the purposes of goodwill, Emery. Your case is truly curious, making me a bit worried. What are you worried about? Asked Emery, slightly tilting his head. It's about the nature of our ancestors' blood. Remember I mentioned that males aren't able to live past 15 years of age?
Yeah.
Emery nodded. That's because our ancestors' blood is savage in nature. The males are unable to fully handle the power of our blood, hence, they are weak at birth. And once they turn 15, those who have the pure blood of our ancestors start to become mad like wild beasts. So, we had to. She didn't finish her sentence. She looked in pain. He somewhat understood what she meant. After all, he had felt an uncontrollable urge whenever he transformed, especially when his life was in danger. High Priestess, what about the ones with the black tattoos in their bodies, like Cavi and Chief Brennus? They are past 15 years of age. Can you teach me how to control it like they did? That is a different matter. Although they were still family by blood, their power came from Gaia. They were not actually born with the gift like you. The last few hundred years, only the female born with the gift is able to control it, and eventually, with the help of Gaia, they will not need to dwell on the bloodline to control the spirit, Nimue explained. Right now, your case is the first one in our history, so I am unsure how to approach your situation. However, I am sure that Gaia will give you her blessing once you are ready. At the moment, here is what I can do for you. Watch carefully and learn. Nimue then began to cast a spell, and her mouth emitted like a very gentle song. Emery felt his mind calm as if he was floating in the sky. The injuries he also had in touching some poisonous plants glowed green as a surge of warm, but firm power surged inside him. Then a notification popped in his head, and it said a healing spell would always be useful for him and his friends. Truly, he was grateful with the gift and the guidance. Then Emery left the cave and retired for the day. He planned to spend more time finding more plants in the forest if he could when a new notification suddenly arrived. After reading this, Emery changed his mind about staying longer in the forest and decided he would go out the next day after he had said goodbye to the others. He still had a few things to arrange and check before he left for the Magus Academy and be gone for at least 3 months. Author note: the next day arrived. First he went to the Lady of the Lake, and before he could say more reasonings, she already accepted his decision. But when it came to the villagers, it was expected they were not fond of a person going outside the forest, particularly by the members of the Akavi warriors. He couldn't blame them because they were the ones who were dealing with the occasional skirmishes or wanderers getting lost in the forest. Not to mention, the last time a person had left this forest, Maeve, it brought them suffering which continued to this day. However, when the high priestess intervened by saying they didn't have authority to keep him here, those who were against him leaving back down. Next thing happened, the village gave him a send-away party by the evening. After attending the send-away party in the evening, Emery exited his tent the next day, only to be surprised that the Fey Sisters decided they would join his little adventure. This would turn into a problem for him. Well, he couldn't even explain about the Magus Academy. There was no way they could join him there. No matter how many times he rejected them, however, the sisters didn't budge until he finally decided to say yes under a condition. There could only be one person who could accompany him. As if this was what the girls were waiting for, the four grinned as they pointed at Morgana. Surprisingly, she agreed. By this point, Emery was seriously considering sneaking like a thief right now. But of course, he wouldn't do that. Still, he needed a good reason to make Morgana go back home before he gets recalled. Emery had already grabbed his equipment and some of the finished cleansing potion, as well as the muscle paste. He then left the village and went toward the direction of where he had entered the forest with the Quentin expedition group with Morgana. What Emery planned to do first was to get information and be up to date, as well as the general state of events of Venta, Lioness Kingdom, and its surroundings. He had been trapped in the spatial space with Kilgraga for half a year, as well as spent a few weeks in Evernight Forest, so his knowledge of the news about the kingdom in general was as good as dust. He was hoping to hear as well if there was anything regarding the Crimson Fang marauders and see if there were any strange rumors about mysterious disappearances. He wasn't particularly thrilled to hear any news about the latter, though. Exiting the Evernight or Forbidden Forest, he followed the path heading toward Venta, the closest town, where Luna Quentin, daughter of a powerful merchant lord, resided. If anyone had information, it would surely be a person who had a lot of money, because they would surely have a wide range of networks with different kinds of people. After about 2 to 3 hours of walking, Emery finally reached Venta with Morgana walking beside him. As he had expected, the town bustled with lots of trade carts and the streets were filled with lots of people and merchants trying to sell their goods. As he walked on the streets of Venta, making his way through the busy crowd, his gaze fell on Morgana, who was lagging behind because she was staring at all the little things the merchants were selling. Only then he realized that Morgana hadn't been outside of the forest before. This was probably the reason why the girls were so adamant in joining him. He walked back to Morgana, whose eyes were still glued to the merchant's stall that was selling accessories. Emery noticed that she was staring with beaming eyes at a hairband of sorts. He then grinned and said, "Excuse me, can I get one of these?" "Sure, young lad." "This is a perfect gift for your girl there," said the merchant, handing out the hairband with a great smile. Emery laughed while placing a bronze coin at the stall. He received the hairband and said, "She's a companion." He then gave it to Morgana, who immediately put it on. The dark, shiny hairband made her messy red hair fall down beautifully. It must have been his imagination, because he thought he saw her cheeks became as red as her hair before turning away. Well, no matter, since she was here anyway. He thought it would be a good souvenir once she returned to the forest. "Let's go, follow me." "There's something else I want you to try," said Emery to Morgana, who immediately walked behind him with her blank expression that occasionally beamed whenever they passed at something that she probably hadn't seen before. Emery led her to another market stall that was exuding the wonderful aroma of freshly baked pig's pie, as well as roasted glazed skewers. He walked up the stall and said to the attendant, "2 please." "Here you go, Morgana, try it while it's hot." This was the first time Emery would be eating this. The one that he had bought a couple of weeks ago had not been consumed because of the events that transpired the moment he bought one. But the wait was worth it. The hard-looking pie was actually so soft that it almost felt apart the moment he took his first bite. He could clearly taste the pig's rich flavor as well as other ingredients which for the life of him couldn't figure out. He had just finished his first bite, but when he turned to ask what Morgana thought of it, hers was already finished and she grabbed another one without paying. Emery was speechless and the attendant was giving Morgana a stern look. He quickly reached for another coin and handed it to the attendant. He said awkwardly, "Please excuse my companion here. She's a bit wrong in the head." It was Morgana's turn to look at him with fierce eyes. She said, "Hey, what did you say?" "I feel like you were making fun of me." Emery twitched his brows. She said, "Feel like," which implied she didn't understand him. He then asked, "What do you mean?" "I was paying for the meal." Morgana gave him a sharper look and said, "It doesn't feel like it." "When you were talking to that man, you said it in a language that I don't understand." Falling into thought, Emery believed that the symbol on his hand translated his speech without him knowing it to whomever he had an intent of speaking with. He confirmed this with the attendant too, and said the same thing as Morgana. Well, no matter. Go ahead and finish the pig's pie. After having a fulfilling snack, Emery dragged Morgana and proceeded to head straight to the Quintons' estate. When Emery arrived in front of the gate, Acer was nearby and they both recognized each other. Master Merlin, you are back. Lady Luna will surely be happy to see you, said Acer, the Dark's kin scout. You announced to Lady Luna that Master Merlin has returned. The guards in front of the gate actually also recognized Emery as they gave him a respectful bow. They asked him to wait, and after a few minutes, the door of the mansion slammed open and Luna Quinton appeared and welcomed him. Merlin, I'm so glad you're alive! The last time he had seen Luna, she had her curled blonde hair not tied to anything, but this time it was beautifully braided, giving her a whole different impression aside from being a business lady. She approached Emery with a huge smile and warmly welcomed him inside the estate, but then her eyes fell on Morgana, who once again looked at things with blank expression. Luna probably recognized Morgana as being one of the forest people, but nevertheless, Luna still invited her with him. Luna led Emery and Morgana to enter a room that had a long table with silver cups, wonderfully embroidered rag, marbled floors, silver candelabra, amongst other things, which made the room look luxurious. Emery couldn't but notice Luna still eyeing Morgana, who had her eyes wide open gawking at things she seemed to have never seen before, from time to time, scanning Morgana's face. Luna sat on the headset first, and when the two followed after her, she opened her mouth and said, "She's the girl who can transform into a big wolf, isn't she?" Author note,